The Atomic Wedgie. On December 21st, 2013, a drunken argument in Pottawatomie County, Oklahoma turned into one of the most bizarre deaths ever recorded. Denver St. Clair, a 58-year-old man, had been drinking with his stepson, 33-year-old Brad Lee Davis. The two had a complicated relationship, marked by years of tension and resentment. That night, their conflict escalated. Davis grabbed his stepfather's underwear from behind. What started as a humiliating prank quickly became something far worse. He pulled the elastic waistband upward with violent force, stretching it over St. Clair's head and down around his neck. This was what teenagers call an atomic wedgie, a schoolyard joke taken to its extreme limit, but Davis didn't stop pulling. The elastic band tightened around St. Clair's throat. What had been an act of anger and humiliation transformed into strangulation. St. Clair couldn't breathe. He clawed at the fabric, digging into his neck, but the elastic was too tight, too deeply embedded in his skin. His airway closed. The medical examiner later confirmed that death took several minutes. St. Clair remained conscious as oxygen stopped reaching his brain. His face turned red, then purple. Petechial hemorrhaging appeared in his eyes, tiny blood vessels bursting from the pressure. He fought for air that wouldn't come. Davis stood watching as his stepfather suffocated. By the time he realized what he had done, it was too late. The underwear had become a ligature, cutting off blood flow to the brain and compressing the windpipe. St. Clair collapsed to the floor. When police arrived, they found the body still wearing the underwear wrapped around the neck. The elastic waistband had left deep marks in the skin that matched the pattern perfectly. The autopsy listed cause of death as asphyxiation by ligature strangulation. The weapon was a pair of underwear. Davis was arrested and later convicted of first-degree manslaughter. The Bigfoot Hoaxer. On August 26, 2012, Randy Tenley stood in the middle of U.S. Highway 93 near Kalispell, Montana. It was after dark. The 44-year-old wore a full military-style ghillie suit, a camouflage outfit covered in shaggy strips of fabric designed to make a person invisible in natural surroundings. His plan was simple. He wanted to create a Bigfoot sighting, to scare passing drivers and hopefully make the local news. His friends waited on the shoulder of the road, watching as Tenley positioned himself in the traffic lane. Cars approached in the darkness. The ghillie suit worked exactly as designed. Against the black pavement and night sky, Tenley was nearly impossible to see. He looked like a shadow, a vague shape that didn't register as human until it was too late. The first car came fast. The driver never saw him. There were no brake lights, no swerving, no attempt to stop. The vehicle struck Tenley at highway speed, throwing his body several feet down the road. The impact broke bones and caused severe trauma, but it wasn't immediately fatal. He lay on the pavement, injured and unable to move. Seconds later, a second car approached. The driver had no warning, no time to react. The headlights illuminated Tenley's body only at the last moment. The car ran over him. This impact finished what the first had started. The crushing force caused massive internal injuries. His chest cavity collapsed. Organs ruptured. Death came quickly after the second strike. His friends ran from the roadside, screaming for help. When police arrived, they explained the Bigfoot hoax. Investigators found no skid marks from either vehicle. Both drivers never saw what they hit until impact. The ghillie suit had worked too well. Tenley died invisible on a dark Montana highway, killed by his own successful disguise. The deadly Ding Dong Ditch. On January 19, 2020, 6 teenagers drove through a quiet neighborhood in Corona, California. They had just pulled off a classic prank, ringing the doorbell at Anurag Chandra's home and running back to their car. It was Ding Dong Ditch, harmless fun that teenagers had been doing for generations. Among them were Daniel Hawkins, Jacob Ivoscu, and Drake Ruiz. But Chandra didn't see it as harmless. He was enraged. Within seconds, he got into his car and began chasing them. What started as a prank became a high-speed pursuit through residential streets. Chandra accelerated to 99 miles per hour, weaving between parked cars and through intersections. The teenagers tried to escape, their driver pushing the car faster, but Chandra stayed close behind. The chase lasted several minutes. Chandra pulled alongside the teens' vehicle. He didn't just follow them. He deliberately rammed their car with his own. The impact forced them off the road. At that speed, the driver had no chance to regain control. The car veered sharply, left the pavement, and slammed into a tree. The collision was brutal. The tree punched through the passenger compartment, metal crumpled inward. The 3 sitting in the back died instantly from the impact. Their bodies were thrown against seatbelts with enough force to cause fatal internal injuries. The tree had essentially cut through the vehicle's structure, crushing everything in its path. The other 3 teenagers survived with serious injuries. Chandra stopped at the scene and was arrested immediately. He was later charged with 3 counts of murder. A doorbell prank had ended in triple homicide. 3 families lost their sons because a grown man couldn't control his rage over a momentary annoyance. Chandra was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Royal Radio prank In early December 2012, Jacinta Saldana was working her shift as a nurse at King Edward VII Hospital in London. The hospital was treating Kate Middleton, who was pregnant with her first child. That morning, the phone rang at the nurse's station. Saldana answered. On the other end were two Australian radio hosts pretending to be Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Charles. They asked for information about Kate's condition. Saldana believed the impersonation was real. She transferred the call to another nurse who gave details about the royal patient's medical status. The entire conversation was recorded. Within hours, the radio station broadcast it internationally. The prank became global news. Saldana's voice was heard by millions of people around the world. The hospital launched an internal investigation. Media coverage intensified. Saldana felt crushing shame and guilt. She believed she had betrayed patient confidentiality, failed the royal family, and humiliated her hospital. The weight of public exposure became unbearable. She couldn't escape the knowledge that her mistake had been broadcast worldwide and replayed endlessly across news channels. Over the next few days, her mental state deteriorated rapidly. She wrote 3 notes expressing her guilt and shame. On December 7th, just days after the prank call, Saldana was found dead in her nursing accommodation. She had chosen to leave by hanging. Colleagues discovered her body. The news sparked international outrage. The radio station suspended both hosts indefinitely. Questions arose about whether a prank call could be considered responsible for someone's death. Legal experts debated culpability, but for Saldana's family, the cause was clear. A joke meant for entertainment had created such overwhelming shame that a dedicated nurse saw no way forward except to end her own life. The prank call had lasted minutes. Its consequences were permanent. The dry ice pool. On February 29, 2020, a birthday party was underway in Moscow, Russia. The celebration was for Ekaterina Didenko, a social media influencer with a large following. Her husband, 32-year-old Valentin Didenko, was among the guests gathered around an indoor swimming pool. Someone had planned a visual spectacle to make the party memorable. They would dump dry ice into the pool to create a dramatic fog effect. Partygoers carried more than 60 pounds of dry ice to the pool's edge. They dumped it into the warm water all at once. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Thick white fog erupted from the pool, rolling across the surface and spilling onto the deck. Guests cheered and laughed. Several people, including Valentin, jumped into the pool to swim through the fog. But dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. When it sublimates in warm water, it releases massive amounts of CO2 gas. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. It sinks and displaces oxygen. The gas was invisible, odorless, and filled the indoor space rapidly. The swimmers in the pool suddenly couldn't breathe. There was no smoke, no visible danger, just the absence of oxygen where air should have been. Valentin and 2 others lost consciousness almost immediately. Their bodies went limp in the water. Other guests tried to help but began collapsing themselves as they entered the gas cloud. Confusion spread through the room. People gasped for air that wasn't there. The decorative fog had become a suffocating blanket of carbon dioxide. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but 3 people were already dead, including Valentin. Several others required hospitalization for asphyxiation. The autopsy confirmed carbon dioxide poisoning. Ekaterina had lost her husband at her own birthday party. A prank meant to create beautiful photographs had displaced all the oxygen in the room and killed 3 people in minutes. The initiation impalement. On June 6, 1892, Wilkins Rustin stood on a street in New Haven, Connecticut, surrounded by members of the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity at Yale University. The sophomore was undergoing initiation, a ritual that was common and largely unregulated in that era. His fraternity brothers had prepared a test. They tied a blindfold tightly around his eyes. He could see nothing. They instructed him to run at full speed down the city street. Other members would watch and laugh. Rustin had no choice but to trust them. He began running, relying only on sound and the feeling of pavement under his feet. He sprinted blindly through the darkness, disoriented and unable to judge distance or direction. His fraternity brothers watched from the sidewalk as he gained speed. A horse-drawn carriage sat stationary on the street ahead. Rustin couldn't see it. He ran directly into the carriage at full force. A sharp wooden pole jutted from the vehicle's frame. The pole penetrated his abdomen. The impact drove it deep into his body, puncturing through his intestines and abdominal cavity. Rustin screamed. He was conscious, aware, impaled on the wooden shaft. His fraternity brothers rushed forward and removed the blindfold. They saw the pole extending through his body. He was taken immediately to medical care, but doctors in 1892 had limited ability to treat such injuries. The punctured intestines leaked bacteria into his abdominal cavity. Peritonitis developed, an infection spreading through his abdomen that 19th century medicine could not stop. Rustin endured 5 days of agony. Fever consumed him. The pain intensified as sepsis spread through his system. His body slowly shut down from the infection. On June 11, 1892, Wilkins Rustin died. A single moment of blindfolded running had resulted in a slow death by infection, all in the name of fraternity tradition. The Blindfolded Gorge. On October 14, 1873, Mortimer Leggett stood with other pledges near a railroad trestle in Ithaca, New York. He was pledging the Kappa Alpha Society at Cornell University. The fraternity had chosen a location known for its danger, a narrow railroad bridge that crossed high above a deep gorge. It was night. Members of the fraternity prepared their initiation ritual. They tied blindfolds around the eyes of each pledge, including Leggett, complete darkness. The pledges were led onto the trestle and instructed to walk across. They could feel only the wooden railroad ties beneath their feet and empty space on either side. The bridge was narrow. One wrong step meant a fall into the gorge below. Balance became difficult without vision. Fraternity members stood watching as the blindfolded pledges moved forward slowly, disoriented and terrified. Leggett stepped carefully, trying to find solid ground with each footfall. His sense of direction failed him. He misjudged where the edge was. His foot missed the tie and met only air. His body tipped sideways. He fell over the edge of the trestle. The blindfold remained tied around his eyes as he dropped. He fell through darkness he couldn't see, not knowing what was below or how far he would fall. The descent lasted several seconds. He hit the rocks and water at the bottom of the gorge with massive force. The impact fractured his skull. His bones shattered. Internal organs ruptured from the collision. Death was instant. When they recovered his body from the gorge, the blindfold was still tied securely around his eyes. Mortimer Leggett had died without ever seeing what killed him. Cornell faced scrutiny over the incident, but hazing practices continued despite his death. A trust exercise designed to test courage had become an execution, and a young man fell to his death while his fraternity brothers watched from above. The Vaseline stop sign. On August 17, 2011, two teenagers in rural Pickaway County, Ohio, decided to pull a prank on passing drivers. They took petroleum jelly and plastic wrap to a stop sign at a quiet intersection. They smeared the jelly thickly across the sign's surface and wrapped it in clear plastic. At night, the sign became completely invisible. Drivers would approach the intersection with no warning to stop. The teens wanted to watch the confusion as cars rolled through without stopping. That evening, 80-year-old Jean Shea was driving with her sister, 85-year-old Mary Spangler, in the passenger seat. They were traveling on familiar rural roads they had driven for years. As they approached the vandalized intersection, Shea saw nothing to indicate she should stop. The sign was there, but the petroleum jelly and plastic wrap made it impossible to see in the darkness. She drove through at normal speed. An SUV was approaching from the perpendicular road. That driver had the right of way. He saw Shea's car not stopping and tried to brake, but there wasn't enough time. The SUV struck the passenger side of the car at full speed. It was a T-bone collision. The impact crushed the passenger door inward. Metal crumpled directly into where Spangler sat. She absorbed the full force of the collision. At 85 years old, her body couldn't withstand the blunt trauma. Her ribs shattered. Internal organs were damaged beyond repair. She died instantly from the impact. Shea survived with injuries but lost her sister. Police found the teenagers shortly after. The petroleum jelly was still smeared across the stop sign, evidence of what they had done. They were arrested and charged. A simple prank designed to cause momentary confusion had made a stop sign invisible and sent an elderly woman through an intersection to her death. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.